Today, I'm going to talk about consent, but before I get started, I want to introduce myself again. My name is Catherine Harry, and I'm a vlogger. My vlog is called A Dose of Cath, and it focuses on gender equality and sex education, basically the whole spectrum of feminism. Yes, the dreaded F word, I'm a feminist. I'm a loud and proud feminist. I know when people hear the word feminist, they either have that reaction, as in like, oh, you're a feminist, that's really progressive, that's really liberal, and it's really inspiring for someone to start to fight for women's rights. But then you also have the other spectrum where people would say, oh, you're a feminist, you must be a men-hating group. You just burn bras and diplomas and you riot against men and you just want to rule men and then put men in shackles. Because seriously, I have been told by some men saying that we shouldn't demand for more equal rights because women already have equal rights, and we demand it because we want to be princesses and we want men to be like slaves. But anyway, so without going too much into feminism, I want to talk about my topic for today, consent. So what is consent? Before I begin this, I want to explain why I chose this topic. I'm pretty sure if you have access to the internet at all, you have heard of the global movement of Me Too and also Time's Up. 2017 was a really big year for sexual assault victims because the internet, Twitter, Facebook have given women a big platform to come forward, sexual assault victims to come forward and to bind together and to start saying that enough is enough, time is up for sexual assault, and that most of us, I would say every single woman, has experienced sexual assault at one point or another in their life, no matter how mild or how severe it is, because one is one too many. And the problem is that a lot of people don't understand consent. A lot of people say that the Me Too movement is just making dating difficult because now every time you go on a date, men would be wary of touching you, of flirting with you, for fear that women would scream that they're assaulting, that the men are assaulting them, but that's not true. That's because there's a lack of understanding of consent. So what is consent? Consent is an enthusiastic, voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. Note the keywords here, enthusiastic and voluntary. If it's not enthusiastic, if it's not voluntary, then it's not really consent. Many people would just say that consent is simple. Yes means yes, no means no. But it's not that simple. There are many, many underlying issues and many aspects that we need to consider when we are talking about consent. Why is consent important? Why am I talking about it tonight? Why am I talking about it in Youth Night in Cambodia? Because in Cambodia, we don't really understand what consent means. According to statistics, Sweden would be one of the countries with the highest sexual assault rates, which is surprising because now that I look at Cambodia, now that I look at the news, there are many sexual assault cases, and I have heard of women who have been assaulted, but our numbers are still pretty low compared to countries like Sweden. Why? It's because if we don't have an understanding of what consent, what sexual assault mean, how can people go report it if they don't even know that they're being sexually assaulted? So it makes it underreported because of that lack of understanding of what it is. According to an article by the Cambodia Daily, female attitudes to the act of rape itself reveals a worrying ignorance of the principle of consent. 81.7% of Cambodian women answered that if a woman does not fight back, it is not raped, compared to 65.1% of men. Excuse my messed up slide. But 81.7% of women think that it's not rape if a woman does not fight back. Imagine that. And 65.1% of men. So as long as a woman does not fight back, does not claw her way out of a man's grip, it means that it's not rape, which is really problematic if you think about it. And the rape statistic in Cambodia, more than 1 in 5 Cambodian men aged between 18 to 49 admit to having raped a woman. That's 1 in 5 Cambodian men. If there are 5 men here, chances are one of you have done it. No, I'm kidding. I'm not saying any one of you have done it, but 1 in 5 Cambodian men. And more than half of those 1 in 5 men committed their first rape before the age of 20. So before they're even 20, they have raped someone. What is consent? Basically, consent is verbal, and that's very important to know and to understand. Of course, body language can be easily misunderstood. I wouldn't say that consent doesn't always 100% have to be verbal, because apparently, obviously, when you're fooling around with your partner, you're not going to ask questions every step of the way. You're not going to ask, can I kiss you? Can I undress you? It's going to be a very long process if you ask every step of the way. But body language, you have to pay very close attention to body language if you want to rely on that. But it's still, the rule of thumb is that consent is verbal. You need a yes from someone, a resounding yes from someone for it to be consent. Lack of no does not mean consent. So just because a person does not say no, it doesn't mean that it's a yes. So answers like, or maybe, that's not really a yes. So you need to also be careful there. For example, if I have $5 and Jane asks me if I can give her $5 and I answer, well, that does not mean that she can get the $5 from me. That was not a yes. Consent can be retracted at any time. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think that if you consent in the beginning, then the whole process is consented already. So consenting to one sexual activity does not mean consent to all sexual activities. Just because a woman agrees to kiss you does not mean that that she has consented you to engage in other sexual activities with her. People need to understand that, because there are certain. So sexual activity has its own processes. You don't just assume that once a process is consented, all the processes have been consented as well. And just likewise, consent is not forever. This is where issues like domestic violence or intimate partner violence comes in, because people think that just because you have had sexual activity with a person once, just because he's your boyfriend, just because he's your partner, does not mean that he gets to have sex with you forever. Does not mean that he gets to always demand sex from you just because he has a marriage license or just because you agree to be his partner. It's not forever. And consent cannot be assumed by a person's choice of lifestyle, previous sexual experience, or clothing. This is where slut shaming comes in, because people think that if a woman wears a certain clothing, then it's a yes, it's an underlining yes from her. She's really secretly wants to have sex with you just because she's wearing a miniskirt, which is not true. What a woman wears, what a woman puts on her body does not mean that she's saying yes or she wants to have engaged in any sexual activity with a man. Coercions, threats, intimidation, or blackmails are not consent. When I think about this point, I thought about the incident earlier this year, revolving Aziz Ansari. I'm sure many of you have heard about that. Many people, and I have argued with many men about this issue as well, they were saying that the woman, Giselle, if I remember well her name, that she consented to having sex with him just because she didn't say no and because she was in his apartment already. So it means that she wants to be with him, she wants to engage in sexual activity with him. And because she didn't push back, but that's not true. Coercions or intimidation, she was at his flat, she was at his apartment, she did not feel comfortable to say no. She did not have the courage to say no. He was intimidating her. He was making her feel uncomfortable. So what he did, and I have argued with people so many times about this, is that what he did was sexual assault. It happens a lot here in countries in Cambodia as well, where you would see karaoke girls, they would be intimidated into saying yes to a client just because he's in a position of power, or just because he can overpower her, he gives her money. So intimidation or blackmails, that does not mean yes, it's sexual assault. What's important in giving consent that people need to understand is that you need to have the freedom or the choice to say no. If you feel like you don't have the freedom to say no, or if you feel like it's not gonna be safe if you don't say yes, then it's not really consent because you're being backed into a corner. That is coercion, that is intimidation, back to our point just now. And also, an incapacitated person, such as people who are underage, they cannot give consent. And also people who are unconscious or people who are heavily under the influence. Basically, drunk people cannot give consent. A lot of people think that, and I have talked to a lot of men as well, saying that, well, if you're both high, if you're both drunk, then if she comes on to you, then it's a yes, right? Well, no, because think about it this way. A person who is heavily under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of drugs, they are not allowed legally to drive. If they cannot even operate a motor vehicle, then how do you expect that person to be able to give consent? And just to wrap it up, a lot of people think that asking for consent is lame or it's not cool, but actually asking for consent can be sexy because it shows that you care about your partner, it shows that you pay attention to them, it shows that you respect them. So we need to turn this whole thing around because we see a lot of rom-coms that go, well, I want to push you back into a corner and I want to kiss you and I want to just, I don't need your consent, I just want it to be a surprise. We see a lot of this in Thai and Korean movies where a woman is backing away and he would be the alpha male and he would just push onto her and then try to kiss her because you know it's romantic when a man overpowers you. But just sending a really toxic messages to young women. I personally have been a victim of that. When I was younger, I used to think that when a man comes on to you and you're trying to resist, it's romantic because it shows that he really persistently wants to be with you. I mean, come on, he wouldn't give up. But as I grow older, as I understand more about these issues, I start to understand how problematic it is. So I stopped watching those dramas and respect your partner when they say no. Ask, listen, and respect. And before I end this presentation, I have a short video about consent that I want to show everyone. I'm pretty sure a few of you have probably seen this video. It was quite viral. It was on the internet for a while now. It's one of my favorite videos, actually.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, fuck yes, I would fucking love a cup of tea, thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please. That's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea. Now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for your very informative talk. So if anyone has any question, she's a busy lady, this is your time.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for your presentation. That was amazing. And I'm a teacher, and I try to teach young people this, along with many other issues related to gender. And my question is, obviously you've had a lot of uncomfortable conversations, particularly with men. How do you advise people, but especially young people, to use language and their voice to educate other people when they're saying something inappropriate, when they're saying harassing language, rather than just constantly fighting it? Do you have a strategy for people to approach and educate?
From my experience, and I have had a lot of all this negative bashing towards me because of what I do, because of the nature of the topics that I make videos for my vlog. I have a lot of people bashing me, saying really crude words to me, calling me names, using really inappropriate language. My strategy is that I don't reciprocate their language. When they use harsh language, I don't respond in that manner. I don't feed it with fire. I don't fight fire with fire. What I do is that I approach them calmly and I try to keep my composure, explaining to them, try not to stoop to their level. So basically, you need to have patience and understand that people come from different places, and sometimes they were just brought up in that certain background, a certain family. So I need to try to understand that. That's what I do, is that I need to try to understand that, while also setting an example for them by using appropriate languages, by using sensible language, so that they see that at least I'm not responding to them in anger as well. So people need to set example, as in, you know how Michael Jackson said, I should start a change with the man in the mirror, right? So if you want to make a change, if you want people to start using better language to communicate, then you need to set an example for them by using those languages, rather than just stooping out to their level and start a shouting match using equally vague, equally crude languages and inappropriate languages. Yeah.
Thank you.